Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our general membership town hall meeting. My name is Rochelle Stewart, and I am your secretary treasurer. I want to start out by letting you know we are trying something new tonight. Some of our members, as they usually do, are joining us by telephone. But this evening, we have some members joining us by live stream as well, either on their phone or their tablets, or some even on their laptops. For those that have not ever been or attended or called into a general membership meeting, we want to say, yay, welcome. Happy to have you at your first general membership meeting. So, because we're trying something a little bit different today, I just want to go over if you do at any time during this call want to ask a question, all you need to do is press star if you're on your phone, and you will be put into a queue to ask a live question. If you're joining us by video tonight, you can press the icon on your screen to raise your hand, and the moderator watching the video stream will let them know that you have a question, and they will address your question then and put you in the queue to ask your question. So again, if you're on the phone, you just need to press the star button on your phone. And if you are doing video stream, you just need to hit your hand icon. So we are waiting for a few more people to join us. We do have a live audience here with us today. So maybe everybody in the live audience can just give a little wave hello to our members out there watching us on video. So tonight we have a very, very special event happening, and that is that we are going to be celebrating Black History Month, which is taking place through February. We have a very, very special guest here to help walk us through that conversation and to participate in that discussion. So we're very excited to have you all here. While we wait for a few more people to join us, some people are still clicking on the link, and I know some people are still answering the call. So I do just want to ask Tom a question, because I've heard a rumor that there is a painting behind us. And the rumor I heard, Tom, is that you, in fact, painted that. Is that true?
Oh, Rochelle, you embarrass me, but it is in fact
It is true.
The image that you see behind you is of a local 401 member. Her name is Monica. I haven't seen Monica for a long time, so if you're out there, Monica, a special hello to you. Monica was a union activist and organizer in Brooks when we were unionizing Lakeside Packers, the large meatpacking plant in Brooks. And she was from the Sudanese community. And I saw her one day standing in front of the 7-Eleven in Brooks, and she was adorned in full African garb. And I did a sketch of her, and I thought to myself, it would be very nice to put Monica in a much more pleasant surrounding, or have a much more pleasant background than the one against which she stood in the stark bald prairie of Brooks, Alberta. And so I ultimately did this painting, and I gave it to her, and I kept a couple of copies. And so it ended up through reasons I'm not sure I fully appreciate or understand, being part of this image tonight and the backdrop for our special Black History Month event. So a special hello to Monica, and that's the basis for that image. And indeed, at our local union, Local 401, we do have our own Black history. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more through the course of this town hall. But yes, the rumor is true, Rochelle. That's a little bit of Tom Hesse's mischief and coloring behind you.
So what do I got to do to get a Tom Hesse painting?
Well, I might.
Very good.
I might be able to arrange that.
Oh, all right.
I might be able to arrange that.
You're very talented.
Thank you.
So again, just a reminder for those of you that are joining us this evening, if you are on video conference, there is a button that you can hit on your screen to ask a question. And if you're listening in on your telephone, you just need to press the star button on your phone to be put into the queue to ask your question. Okay, so I am going to, like we do at all general membership meetings, is I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement, and I am officially going to call our general membership meeting to order. UFCW Local 401 respectfully acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory in Edmonton and Central Alberta, Treaty 7 territory in Calgary and Southern Alberta, Treaty 8 territory in Northern Alberta. We recognize the history of oppression of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all Indigenous people in their traditional lands across Turtle Island, of which Canada is a part of. We are committed to doing the ongoing and active work of reconciliation. UFCW Local 401 recognizes that we are all treaty people with treaty obligations, and we are committed to living in accordance with the spirit of intent, of peace and friendship that is foundational to the treaty relationship. As a labor movement, we will actively work together in solidarity to end oppression and seek justice for all Indigenous peoples on this land. All right. So, again, if this is your first time joining us on a general membership meeting, we do ask poll questions because your feedback is, of course, very, very important to us and to your union. So, I'm going to start us off this evening before I hand things over to President Hesse and try to set him up for their conversation this evening. So, if you are on your phone, all you need to do is press the button that corresponds with your answer. And if you are on video stream, you just need to click the tab that says vote and you'll be able to vote. Okay. So again, if you're on the phone, you use your keypad. If you're watching us live stream this evening, just hit the tab that says votes. Okay. So our first poll question. Were you aware that February is Black History Month before we advertised this town hall? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no, or vote on your screen if you are watching on video stream. Again, were you aware that February is Black History Month before we advertise this town hall? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no, or vote on your screen if you are watching us during the video streaming. Okay, so while we wait for those results to roll in, Tom, I am going to pass it to you to introduce our very exciting guest this evening.
Wow. I'm sorry, I don't have my microphone on already. Here he is on my right, and he's wearing a mask, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because few workers know more about masks than our members. I'm joined tonight by actually a number of guests, but let me start by introducing our primary guest and the gentleman who we've advertised and who is our star tonight and who is very fashionable. We were talking about fashion, and he likes the television show Seinfeld. We talked a little bit about that, so we just had a few moments to get to know each other. And his name is Ubaka, and his last name is Ogbogu. Am I close? All right, so I've got it right. And some people call him doctor because he is a doctor. Now, he's not a medical doctor. He's an academic, really smart guy, PhD. He's a professor and associate dean of research in the Faculty of Law at the University of Alberta, a member of the Royal Society of Canada's College of New Scholars, Artists, and Scientists, the 2023 cohort, the Cates Group Chair in Health Law at the University of Alberta, and the Chair of the University of Alberta Research Ethics Board. The doctor is a recipient of the Confederation of Alberta Faculty Association's Distinguished Academic Early Career Award. He holds a doctorate, that's a PhD, and that's why we call him doctor, in law from the University of Toronto, a Master of Laws degree from the University of Alberta, and undergraduate degrees in law from the University of Benin, Nigeria, and the Nigerian Law School. So he's from a lot further away than Rochelle and I, who are from Saskatchewan. And so we look forward to hearing about his perspective. So, Doctor, I'm either going to call you Doctor or I'm going to call you Ubaka.
Ubaka is fine.
Ubaka is fine.
Ubaka is that's my name. It's wonderful.
Okay, so a special welcome.
Thank you.
A special welcome to you, sir.
Thank
now,
you.
I'm going to take a minute here because we're not just about the good doctor tonight. We have many people in our studio audience who are celebrating Black History Month with us, and Ubaka is going to talk about something that he calls Black Joy, which I think is super cool. We were talking about that in advance, and I want to bring a little bit of joy to the room through perhaps introducing some of our people that are here. And when I look around the room, I see our own Black history. I see that our local union makes Black history. Indeed, the picture of Monica is a woman that made Black history. And I see Deb Cadmus over there, who made Black history by starring in a television commercial and taking on Safeway and telling the Alberta public that workers who work in grocery stores matter, and that she talked about how she couldn't afford to shop where she worked and the affordability crisis. She was punished for that by Safeway, but she stood strong and emerged from that. I want to actually give Deb a round of applause for making labor history and making Black history. We're joined by, I see Abdul Latif from Brooks. I see my good friend Mohammed looking resplendent in his purple garb tonight. I see Joseph Cogg. I see Roger. I see, who else do I see? Well, I'm going to introduce 4 individuals who are going to ask some questions, but so happy to be joined tonight by all of our, so many of our activists, so many of our staff representatives, and what a pleasure to have all of you here. But in addition to introducing Ubaka, I want to introduce as well a few of our staff representatives who are going to ask questions and participate in tonight's conversation. And they are, and this would be Claire right here. Claire, if you can wave and smile at the camera. Claire hails from the Caribbean island of Barbados, and Claire, her last name is Griffith, and she's a negotiator here at Local 401. Claire grew up with a mother who was a union representative and served on her union's executive council throughout Claire's childhood, and sparked Claire's passion for employment relations as a career. Claire works for us now. She's a negotiator. She holds a Bachelor of Laws with honors, with an emphasis on employment law and discrimination in employment. And during her final year of study, that was her emphasis during her final year of study, rather. She has worked at the leading public workers' labor union in Barbados right after finishing her law degree as an industrial relations officer. Claire also holds a master's degree in international trade policy, a program which afforded her the opportunity to receive training in negotiations at the United Nations and the World Trade Organization in Geneva, Switzerland. Working as an industrial relations officer, Claire has negotiated on behalf of union members, both at the national level and with leading parliamentary ministers of Barbados, and on the international level with entities such as the International Monetary Fund. We are so proud and so happy to have Claire working for our local union as a negotiator. So welcome, Claire, and welcome tonight. Faduma. Faduma should require no introduction with her smile and her style. She's got smile and style. Faduma Ahmed Bayo, Faduma's been working for Local 401 since 2009. She immigrated from Africa and was involved in social justice before even setting foot on Canadian soil as an anti-apartheid activist in South Africa. After working in the meat plant, the JBS plant in Brooks, Faduma joined Local 401 as an administrative assistant. Quickly, Faduma fueled her activism by assisting members in the plant and the grocery store within the broader Brooks community. In 2018, Faduma was promoted to her role of Union Labor Relations Officer, where her passion for community engagement grew even stronger. Faduma has made significant strides in protecting the rights of temporary foreign workers, advocating for expeditious pathways to residency, and strengthening the collective power of workers who are not only new Canadians, but also perform the essential work that Canadians rely on. I know Faduma recently got a really cool award that I think she was too modest to put in her bio. A national award for leadership, for being a leader, and I won't hover around that. We sent that out to our entire membership. Maybe we'll do it again just for fun, Faduma, just to see if. And Faduma currently resides with her family in Calgary, Alberta, where she now represents our members at the Cargill meatpacking plant in High River. So Faduma does the day-to-day hardball work of representing employees and does it so very well. And there's Abdi, resplendent, I must say, in his orange garb. I think that looks good on you. A little more fashion going on here. Now, his full name is, and so Abdi, I'm not sure I knew your full name before this, and it's got a whole lot of syllables in it. Abdi Kadir. Have I got it right? Abdi Kadir Guled. He became a local 401 employee in 2014 as a senior labor relations officer. His duties include organizing, promoting, training, and educating workers, and he also provides union members with informational materials, work-related guidance, assistance. As an equality representative, Abdi analyzes employer policies, discipline, and working conditions such as workloads, fairness, health and safety, and dignity and respect in the workplace. And if you had a conversation with Abdi, you would know that he's a super cool guy that used to have a radio show, but I don't see that in his bio, but maybe you should be up here doing this show, Abdi. So I've seen some pretty modest bios here, but welcome, special welcome to you, Abdi. You know, I'm a big fan of this next gentleman, Sam Nwako, right? Originally from Ghana, West Africa. This guy is something else. He has a grace and an elegance that is really kind of unmatched. He's a special guy. And Sam was educated in Ghana with a joint master's degree in philosophy and divinity. He came to Canada in 1997 after working in 6 different European countries. He was in Nova Scotia for a few years, moved to Alberta in 1999. In Alberta, Sam pursued HR and addiction studies at the University of Alberta and clinical pastoral education at the University of Alberta Hospital. And before becoming to Local 401, Sam spent over 11 years with the Government of Alberta in the Ministry of Children's Services and also worked with Edmonton Community Legal Centre, which is essentially a pro bono legal institution. Sam has been with the local as a union labor relations officer since February of 2015. It's been instrumental in the local union's initiatives on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sam is the author and originator of the popular AFL lecture series, The Power of Idea. On Black History Month, Sam says, "My history, my identity, my person. It's never too late to right the wrong." And so a special welcome to you, Sam. So many great people, so little time. But you want to? Do we have a poll question result? You want to do that, Rochelle, before I get all worked up?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. So just a reminder for those of you listening in on your phone, all you need to do if you want to ask a question, which we hope you do, is press the star button on your phone. And if you are watching through video, you just hit the hand icon to be put in the queue to ask your question. Okay, so we asked a poll question around Black History Month and if you knew that it was Black History Month in February prior to us advertising that. And so 81% of you said yes, you were aware, and 19% said no. So that's good. We got 19% that are learning something new already. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to answer our poll questions. I might as well do the second poll question.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get right into it then, and then I'll pass it back to President Hesse. So again, you can use your keypad to answer the question, or you can hit the vote tab on your video stream. So our second question is, do you feel it is important to have Black History Month and other dates to reflect the struggles and injustices that exist in our society? Press 1 for yes or 2 for no or you can vote on your screen. Again, do you feel it is important to have Black History Month and other dates to reflect on the struggles and injustices that exist in our society? Press 1 for yes and 2 for no, or you can vote on your screen. Okay, and again, just another reminder, press the star button to ask a question or the hand icon if you are watching us live. Thank you. Tom, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. I'm certainly gratified to hear the polling numbers with respect to people's awareness of Black History Month. So that's a good thing. And so welcome, and it's really good to be here with you. Well, I've got a question. It took a while, but I've got a question. Ubaka?
Yes, Tom.
The shoes.
Yeah, the shoes are the shoes.
I'm digging the red shoes. They're not just the shoes, man.
The shoes are the shoes.
The shoes are the shoes. So if you've learned nothing else tonight, maybe we'll have T-shirts done. The shoes are the shoes.
Shoes are the shoes.
Right? I ask him one question, and he comes up with something cool. All right. I recently saw an interview with Hollywood actor Morgan Freeman. He said he didn't like Black History Month. He said, and he didn't like the concept of it. He said he felt that it relegated Black history to only 1 month. And Freeman asked the interviewer, I think it was on 60 Minutes or something, and he said, how would you like if the history of white people was relegated to just 1 month? So, let me ask you the obvious question, to which there may not be an obvious answer, but we're hoping you could help us out, my friend. Do you think it's important to have a special month, like a Black History Month, and why?
Well, thank you, Tom, and thanks everyone. This is it's actually kind of overwhelming to be in the presence of people who do what you do. So I wanted to start off by saying thank you for what you do. It's really, really powerful to hear your stories. So thank you for being part of this panel. So to Morgan Freeman, I think I can understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, Morgan Freeman is one Black person, right? The thing we have to remember is that Black people are not a monolith. We're not one people in a sense. We don't all have the same background, the same things that move us, the same feelings, the same thoughts. We're as diverse as the number of Black people in this room and the ones who are not in this room. And we're allowed to have different perspectives on a thing like Black History Month. So I respect his view of it, because I think what he's getting at is the unfairness in having something set aside that marks us as a minority, that marks us as people who have faced history in certain ways, when that is not the same for, say, white people, for example. So it does have a point there that there's something to it, where you set aside a month saying, this is the month we're going to recognize you. And it does work out that way. Sometimes I ask myself, do people remember Black people after this month? Do they think and talk about Black people after this month? What did they really learn? Is it about us, or is it about them? So I think that's where Morgan Freeman is coming from. But at the same time, if you set it in context, the lives of Black people throughout the world, the lives of Black people in North America, you can see why it's important to set aside some time to pause and reflect on that, on Black life. Because Black life is complex in a lot of ways. It is fraught in a lot of ways. And people need to be reminded of Black life in a way that is that specific, that poignant. There needs to be something about us that people can relate to, even if they're taking a brief pause in the year to reflect on that. And that's what Black History Month, I think, is about. It's about a time that people can ask Black people, what can we learn about you? It's a time that we can take for ourselves a pause to reflect on what this all means for us. It's a time to celebrate Black joy and the things that make us one, even though we are a diverse group of people with diverse interests, cultures, perspectives. There's so much variability among us. We're not a monolith. We're not, just one block. And so I think he has a point, because I do wonder if people remember that Black life runs 24/7, 365 days a year. But we take what we can get. So it's good that he's questioning, but it's also good that we have the month.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you are different in this room than the rest of us for a number of reasons. You've got the coolest shoes, right?
There's a lot of cool shoes around.
There are some other cool shoes, but you've got the coolest shoes. But you've offset yourself by wearing a mask. Now, our union fought very, very hard during the pandemic to bring attention to the issue of the transmissibility of this disease, how it disproportionately hurts vulnerable populations. Our members went to work. They were essential. They went to work in meatpacking plants. Employers did not care about them in the plants as much as they should have. We saw the largest COVID outbreak in North America, and people died and suffered at Cargill. They suffered at JBS. We later saw some terrible tragedies in Red Deer at Olymel.
Yep.
Grocery stores were the only public places at one time in society, and thousands of our members went every day to work in fear before there were vaccinations. We lobbied and fought for the ability to wear a mask. I remember a Safeway official saying to an employee at the very early in the outbreak, "You can't wear that mask. You're going to scare people."
Right.
And we fought for plexiglass and social distancing. And we've learned about something called long COVID, and many of our members are still gravely concerned and very sort of nervous about the pandemic. And many of our members still wear masks, while others, their consciousness has changed about it. And I wonder why you choose to wear a mask on this evening, and I wonder if you could reflect on that for us.
Sure, I can. So I'm a worker myself. I work at the University of Alberta. I also have a labor background. My parents are both labor people. They were both teachers. They are both teachers, and they were both labor people. And one thing that has concerned me about this pandemic is how the government has failed to actually communicate to the public the risk we're facing with COVID. COVID is not just an infectious disease that impacts people and makes them sick. It does come with chronic illness. You can get long COVID, and if you get long COVID, that's going to affect your ability to work. It's going to affect how you live. It's going to affect how you're able to take care of your children. There's so many ways it could impact you. Now, a government could look at that and say, sure, we can't keep things closed. I get that. We can't keep things closed. People have to get back to work. We have to get society moving. But there's a balance. There's a balance where you say, okay, we're also going to look at what the best measures are for keeping people safe. And they've not done that. Now, the reasons I wear a mask, there are two reasons. One is personal. I am a first-generation Canadian. I don't have any relatives. I'm a first-generation immigrant, sorry. I don't have any relatives in North America. I take care of people here. I have a wife who's also a first-generation immigrant. I have two daughters who were born here. So I have a family here, and I have a family back home in Nigeria that I contribute to their lives. It's very important to me that I don't get chronic illness, because if I get chronic illness, I don't have generational wealth. I don't have anybody, no bank account with money, no relatives to take care of my children, nowhere to go. The day I fall sick and I stop working, that's the day anything I enjoy, that's the day the cool shoes go. Right?
We wouldn't get that.
So it's more serious for me. Not that it's not serious for anybody here, but it's serious for me in a very real way. And some might say, you're living in fear, but if I get sick, if I get chronic illness, that's the day that everything changes for me. And so if this is what I have to do to stop that from changing, I'll do it. So that it's personal in that sense. But it's also a protest, because the pandemic is impacting, as you described, people who work every day. They don't have money stashed away somewhere. They're not rich people. These are everyday people who go to work, who have to feed their families. And the government is not telling them the truth. The truth is, we can actually do things to make the workplace safe. We can do things to make people safer. And it's all the responsibility of the government to communicate good information, clean the air so that people can work and live safely. But they won't do that. And I am somebody who works in the area of health law. So I monitor what's going on with people and their health and how law and policy impacts that. And so I'm very close to information about what's going on. And people are getting sick, people are dying, but there are people who the government has already deemed them to be dead. In the government's eyes, these are people who are dead already. And there's nothing that can be done about it. They might be living, but they're living dead. And I don't like that. And so the mask is also a way of expressing solidarity with them. Because if I was, say, 70 years of age, already have comorbidities, I'm living in a home somewhere, trying to like enjoy my retirement and get the best of my life. I don't want to die from a disease. That's not how we should be. And if that happens to me, I'll be very, that's not the way to go. And I think more can be done to highlight that there are people like that who are dying every day. And so the mask is just solidarity with them for that.
Thank you. Certainly points worth reflecting upon. And we have urged our members, particularly those who are working in workplaces where there's large numbers of people moving around and little opportunity for social mobility. When they go to work, we have asked them to reflect carefully on whether or not they ought or ought not wear a mask. So I thank you for that. We certainly lobbied for mandatory measures, a variety of mandatory measures earlier in the pandemic.
Right.
And at this stage, we're not saying to our members, don't wear a mask. We're not saying that. We're not encouraging people not to wear masks. We're having a dialogue about the propriety of masks and the choices that people want to make.
Right.
And so I think you've given our members some real pause for reflection on the issue of masking.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
I think it's important to note that I'm not blaming individuals for this, right? I think masks are expensive. I certainly am able to afford to wear them. If I'm taking a political position, it's costing me money. This is like $90 a box. Not many people can afford that, right? But also, we wouldn't need this mask if the government actually cleaned the air, right? The government could actually come up with measures to bring in more fresh air into buildings. So, for example, in my house, because I have some privilege, when this pandemic started, I realized that my house doesn't breathe. Fresh air doesn't come in. And we live in one of the coldest places on earth. Through our winter, we box ourselves in. Fresh air doesn't come in. I bet you, if you go down to the to where the premier is, fresh air comes in. You can configure buildings so that fresh air comes in. I install something in my house that brings fresh air in and takes stale air out. That can reduce infection. So it's important to know that I'm not blaming people. We just need the government to give us better information, take care of us, because that's why we elect them.
Certainly, we have asked our employers to do assessments about the measure of air circulation and their entire airflow systems.
Right.
Because we discovered, a little later in the pandemic that you're not going to get it from touching a box of cornflakes. No. It's an airborne virus.
It's an airborne virus.
Yeah. Interesting reflections. All right. You're obviously an interesting guy. Right?
I hope so.
And we were talking, before the call about just getting to know someone. Mm-hmm. If you want to understand someone, don't apply a label to them and don't move from an assumption of labels, just talk to them. And, I would like to ask you a little bit about your story. I mean, you're here in what you described as one of the coldest places on earth.
Right.
You got the cool red shoes. You're wearing a mask, right? You're teaching law at the University of Alberta. You're involved in health law. You're involved in the Cates Group. You have a family, and you come from a very distant place.
Mm-hmm.
I know people that describe Africa as a country, and I know it's not a country. I know it's a continent. I think there are over 50 countries in Africa, and there, people from each place, just like Canada. I mean, we have different economies, different cultures, different geography, and so I don't even like to hear stereotypes about Canada, right? I mean, maybe we have some cultural traditions, some common cultural traditions, but you're from Africa. You're from a particular place in Africa, and you obviously have a bit of a story to tell. And if you had the opportunity tonight, I'm going to give you, in fact, that opportunity to talk to thousands of food processing trade union people,
right,
to tell them who you are and what your story is. What would it be? What would that story be?
Okay, I'll tell it as quickly as possible. I was born in a small town called Ogwashuku in a Delta state, in a state called Delta in Nigeria, which is a country in West Africa. I am the second of 7 boys. My parents only had boys. I'm the second. I think they were looking for a girl. I've never actually really asked them. I think that's what it was, or they were just being irresponsible. 7 is a bit much. They're both teachers, and my dad taught secondary school, which would be the equivalent of high school. My mom taught primary school, which would be the equivalent of elementary school. And life growing up was certainly tough, because they didn't earn much, and we grew the food we ate. That's kind of how I like to describe it. But my father was determined that we all go to school, and so we all did. The 7 of us. I do have a sister, but that's a stepsister. My father had a child out of his marriage to my mom. And we didn't find out until much later, but I want to acknowledge I do have a sister, a stepsister. But anyway, so we all went to school. I went to school very early. I went to boarding school, actually, at 9, university at 16, became a lawyer at 21, and then realized that I didn't want to be an adult. So I practiced law for a few years, and then I thought, oh, this is tough. Earning money, so I'll go back to school. So I went back to I decided to do a master's, and I applied to come to University of Alberta. I got admitted in various places. UBC was one of them in British Columbia, University of British Columbia, some schools in the UK. But I had a friend who told me that Alberta is the warmest place of all of them. We're still friends. It's a tough one, but anyway, that's how I came here, and I haven't looked back since. I actually love this place. I met my wife here. We moved to Toronto for a bit for my PhD. Moved back here because I got a job at the U of A. My wife is a nurse who works for AHS as a manager of long-term care facilities, and we have 2 beautiful daughters. The first one is 14 years of age. Her name is Maya. And the second is 10 years of age. Her name is Namaka, which means mom is best. Yeah. That's
Sorry, Tom, I'm just going to jump in here and remind everybody who is listening in this evening, if you do want to ask a question of either the doctor or a panel or myself and Tom, please, if you're on your phone, just press the star button and you'll be put into the queue. And if you are watching on video, you just need to put your hand up and the moderator will address you. Okay, so again, star button if you're on your phone, hand up if you're watching on live stream. Thank you. Sorry.
Now, I know that labor law isn't your specialty, or doesn't appear to be based on your bio. And of course, we're union people, we're troublemakers, and we're demanding more fairness in the workplace and fairer wages. As you grew up in Nigeria, I'm wondering if you could, is there anything that you might note about the difference in the economy and the politics and the social structure? If you were to draw our attention, we like to distinguish ourselves as Canadians from Americans. We talk about cultural and economic differences, political differences, and of course, we do so from a worker point of view. Is there anything any contrast that you would draw between Nigerian society and Canadian society in terms of these matters? Is there anything that has been of note to you or stood out to you?
That's a tough question. Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things I could think about. I grew up in the time of military dictatorships in Nigeria, and certainly it was riskier at the time to be involved in labor. Much of it was there was no room for negotiation, really, if I recall correctly, and so much of it was taken to the streets and being very vocal about what the pain points were for people who were involved in labor at the time. I certainly remember in university a lot of strikes, a lot of rioting, people just taking to the streets to express their frustration with the labor situation in Nigeria. My parents, as people who are both teachers, um, you know, they I don't think they were ever paid, to be honest. There'll be months will go by and they won't get paid. So it was something that bad where you work and then you don't earn a wage. You don't the wage you've earned, you don't actually receive it. So there was a lot of that going on. Um, but through all of that, there was also the kind of grassroots bond that people have from facing the same situation. And so it wasn't, very often people think of these sorts of stories, these sorts of histories as just pain. But it wasn't that wasn't the situation I grew up in. That was the reality. But what I remember from the working life in Nigeria for those who could work was a lot of joy around that, a lot of sort of feeling of having common problems, but also common ways to relate to the world and to celebrate. So I think it's much more visceral where I grew up in than here, where it's the struggle is the same, but the ways that people go about the struggle might differ because of the military dictatorship and the context in which that struggle was happening. Certainly, people are not. I don't think people are getting killed here, by being arrested and thrown in jail. But there could be different kinds of things happening to activists here, where they feel the similar kind of pain. But that's the best I can offer because I wasn't really involved with it. I was observing it as a child.
Well, certainly, I think that is insightful. And so I've now heard you use these terms, black joy and black pain, right, and this sort of contrast between the two. And I love what you say about this sense of shared experiences and this sense of community that emerges. We call that solidarity in our union. When you have this shared experience and these commonalities, you begin to form this bond.
Right.
So, in your experience, you've lived in Nigeria and you've lived in Canada. Would that be a common or universal human experience or potential human experience in your view?
Yes. I mean, the reason I bring up black joy and black pain is that very often, especially for months like this, well, Black History Month, there's a tendency to focus on what people perceive as what is painful in Black history. If we're thinking of Black as the thing that unites all Black people around the world, so there's a tendency to highlight, things like slavery, racism. But anytime I'm with Black people, there's so much joy around. There's so much that we share that's joyful: music, art, fashion, culture. I could meet a Black person who's from Barbados, from a different part of the world, and there's something that binds us. It's sort of a form of community that comes from a shared history, that comes from, I suppose, shared pain, but as joyful. And I think that's what I saw mostly growing up, because I grew up in very difficult circumstances. I grew up in a place where, there was a lot of difficulty, a lot of poverty, but also a lot of joy. I think there was a poll that was done a few years ago about the happiest people in the world. And it's countries where there's Black majority populations that are also low income economies. People in these places get so much joy out of so little. And that certainly is the experience that I identify with an event like Black History Month. I want to hear about, stories like this, stories like hers of Black people just facing a situation with, she's gonna have a smile on her face when she goes before her employers, and that's just how Black people are.
That's Deb. That's Deb. I think she has plenty of Black joy. Listen, I want to confront a topic squarely that deals a little bit with Black pain.
Sure.
Because we've watched it unfold on television in recent years. It strikes me as very much a contemporary Black issue. And over the last number of years in North America, we've seen the tragic murders of Black individuals, sometimes at the hands of police, like a respected institution. Not surprisingly, the rallying cry response from the Black community, particularly in the United States, has been Black Lives Matter. And I always want to add the word "too" at the end of that. Like, Black Lives Matter too. Like, we matter too, in case you're not paying attention. But this phrase, Black Lives Matter, has been a rallying cry and a phrase utilized by the Black community in response to these injustices. Now, there isn't anyone who hasn't heard this kind of pushback, which I've come to think is a bit of a dog whistle for racists, unfortunately, at times. But there are others who are just confused by the phrase Black Lives Matter, and they want to say, well, don't all lives matter? And so, I've heard this, and I've heard this debate, I've heard this conversation. Sometimes it seems political, and other times it seems more innocent, right? And so, shouldn't the phrase be all lives matter? What in your view is this debate about? Can you offer some clarity on it and maybe some guidance for us?
Sure. So it's one of those things in what we call, our culture wars that we like to have. It's a bit of a lot being said about something that is nothing really. Because if you understand how that phrase came to be, Black Lives Matter, you wouldn't debate it. It's about Black people getting treated in a certain way that others don't get treated in. And it's a reminder that this is a unique problem that Black people face in society. And because it only happens to us, you should be mindful of the fact that it only happens to us. You could say, stop choking Black people. But nobody will go, well, stop choking all people, because it will sound stupid. But that's what Black Lives Matter means. It's a convenient phrase that reminds people that Black people face particular dangers that other people don't face. And to say all lives matter is not to be mindful that it's not just about those words. It's about the philosophy, the meaning of those words. And what it means essentially is we wouldn't need to say Black Lives Matter if you stop treating Black people this way, right? So if you think of it that way, if you think of it that, this happened because a Black man, for something that is nothing really, got trampled to death on the streets, right? And that happens every day in the United States. It happens every day in Canada. There's been stories here in Alberta of Black people just losing their lives. In Calgary, a young man who's a leader of a community got shot by the police for nothing. That doesn't happen to all people. It happens to Black people uniquely. If the police stops doing that, we wouldn't need the phrase. We don't want the phrase. Nobody wakes up in the morning and starts looking for a phrase to define their pain and the sense of loss they feel or the sense of fear they feel when they engage with the world. We do. I have to remind my daughters every day that the world is not going to treat them the same as everyone else, and they should be mindful of that. If I don't have to do that, I'll be okay. If I don't need phrases to tell people to care about me, I'll be okay. But if other people feel like they need those phrases, they truly genuinely need it. So if you feel like your life is like a black person's life and you need to say, my life matters, by all means, we don't own the word matter, use it. But when you use it, think about why you're using it. Is your life as threatened as that of a black person for existing? If it's not, then don't use the phrase just because you want to make trouble. Because I don't want to use it. I don't want to be saying Black Lives Matter. I just want to be a black person who wakes up in the morning and lives my life. If I need a phrase to remind people that I matter, that's a problem. So in a lot of ways, it's a nothing debate that we have in our culture wars because people don't want to be mindful of why we're saying it.
So what you're saying is you're really saying that you matter because someone has hurt you. Like, please treat me like I matter. It's a reaction to
right
to something.
because people don't think we matter. That, I mean, the police does not think we matter. If they treat us so, I live in a neighborhood where I can't afford it. I can't afford where I live, but I waited till we basically bought the cheapest house in the neighborhood. We've spent all the money we earn trying to fix the house. Why did we do that? Because the police does not come there. I can't think of. I have white colleagues. When I tell them this story, they're looking at me like I'm crazy because they never think of that when they have to buy a house. When I have to buy a house, I ask myself, will my wife be able to come back from work when she goes out? Will I, as a black man, be able to leave my house without getting someone to stop me? Right? Thinking I stole the car I'm driving or I stole the clothes on my back. Will my kids be able to play? I think of all of these things. If I don't have to, then I don't have to remind people that I matter. Because you know what? Most people don't. It's kind of a weird thing. I don't know too many white people who go around saying, listen, my life matters. No, because nobody puts your life at risk. My life is fundamentally at risk every day I leave my house. And so I have to keep reminding people that my life matters. So when people say all lives matter, sure, you do you. But at the end of the day, is it true? And do you think we're saying it to make trouble? No, it's because, we have to remind people.
I watched a young black woman on television questioning the logic of this and explaining this phrase. And she said, there was a fire in my neighborhood. The fire truck came to my neighborhood and they put out the fire on the house in the corner. And everybody thought they should put out the fire in the house in the corner. And everyone else didn't run out of their houses and say, what about my house? Why don't you spray water on my house too? Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea.
Why, we're responding to the fire that you have to face.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we're saying it because, it's not look at me, my life matters. I'd rather not say it. I'd rather not explain that my life matters. It's kind of an odd thing to explain.
Okay. Thank you. I have to be smart enough to push this button so you can hear me, which I'm not that smart. I'm going to ask one of our panelists here, one of our semicircle of friends here, a question. I think, and I love your phrase, black joy, and contrasting it with black pain. And, maybe the former comes when at least we acknowledge the latter, or maybe it's easier. And, I'm a white baby boomer that grew up in a largely white prairie city. It was an ethnic city in the sense that there were a lot of new Canadians, but they were Italians and they were Polish and they were Ukrainians and they were Germans, and they were many of whom were immigrants or second generation. And, my mother talked about ethnocentrism, that people used to make fun of us because we were Polish. They'd make Polish jokes and call us Polacks, but we weren't a visible minority. And there were very few Black people that I interacted with at that time in Canada. When I grew up, I remember we lived in a transition apartment building. I played with a little girl named Sharifa, but frankly, the most notable Black people I were exposed to were the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I collected these football cards, and I went down to the grocery store and I got them to autograph my football cards, and they were sort of local heroes because it was a football town. I knew about the civil rights movement because my parents were progressives, and I grew up in a political household. There was debate in my household. I knew about Dr. King, who was assassinated when I was 9 or 10 years old. I certainly saw that on the news. But and I remember my family being very rattled by the television series Alex Haley's Roots. I remember us learning about this man named Kunta Kinte and seeing slavery, put in the lap of my white family in our living room and in the laps of North American families, and really confronting slavery. But when I really think about it, I didn't learn much about slavery in elementary school or high school in Canada. And, this notion of 12 million people being stacked like cordwood and sent across the ocean to the Western Hemisphere, was not something that was starkly put to me in my life. And in fact, I think the notion, the Canadian version of slavery that I came to know was that we were this sort of Disneyland, and that it was the landing place for the Underground Railroad. And I'm not so sure Canadians have ever really confronted our slave history. So I want to ask Sam. I know Sam and others have participated in our dialogue and debate and interaction, which has been very magnified. And I want to thank all of our Black activists for magnifying and elevating this debate at our local union during Black History Month. And Sam, I know you're from Ghana, which was a departure point for slaves. I know that about history. I have a friend that recently visited a place called the Slave Castle in Ghana, saw the point of no return. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little about if you've had a look at or confronted Canada's slave history, and if you could make a few comments and maybe enlighten us a bit as to whether or not we had a slave history and what form it took.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief, but I just want you to know that the castle that you're talking about, the Cape Coast Castle, is actually where my dad comes from. Wow. So, sitting or standing at my dad's place, you see this towering figure there. So, yeah. Between 1629, between 1629 and 1834, history tells us that 4,000, some historians say 4,200, but I'll go with 4,000 people of Black ancestry or African ancestry were enslaved in Canada. And at the time, there used to be what we used to call the British and French colonies. These were Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, PEI, and Nova Scotia. So those were where the whole the slavery was concentrated. Now, to talk about whether or not you talk about 12 million, 12.5 precisely, Africans who were shipped down here, where they landed and who brought them here, by the time they reached the Western Hemisphere, we have lost 15% of the 12.5 million. And before that, and after that to date, that is the biggest number or the highest number of lives lost at sea. And some of them were killed because they rebelled on the boats. Some of them died because of disease and hunger. Some of them they just threw out there because they want to lighten the weight of the boat. So we have the French, we have the Portuguese. At that time we call them Spaniards. We have the Spaniards or the Spanish. Then we have the British. these are the four main empires. They are not the only ones, because you have the smaller ones like Danes and the Belgians and others who were involved in this heinous trade. Canada, when you look at it, Canada was not a destination per se of the slaves coming from Africa. We became by association. What I mean is that because Canada was British and French rule, they tend to also bring people here. So the people who landed, the slaves or the Africans who landed in some of these British and French territories, happened to come here through them. So for them, especially the French, they gave a reason. He said, in order for our economy to be viable, we need forced labor, which means they will have to bring some of the slaves from the South. And the slaves coming from the South, in my own terms, they were almost like duty-free kind of products that you buy from them. They come in, nobody stops them because they are brought in by whites. And that is how people ended up here as slaves. Now, the truth of the matter too is that these individuals, they were denied their humanity. They were forced into what they call the forced labor. And then there is the abuse, the psychological abuse, the physical abuse, reproduction abuse, and sexual abuse. They went through all that. I've heard people say, but it's not as bad as the US. That's fine. It's not as bad as the US because Canada was not the time of the Jim Crow era. You know, we didn't have people being hung on the tree and those kind of things. But when it comes to the abuses, we also had our own. Okay, we also had our own. In 1781, St. John's Island, which is now Prince Edward Island, they came out for the first time with a legislation that actually bordered the legal parameters of slavery. That was the first ever. And that legislation is that baptism cannot set you free as a slave. Prior to that, in some of the territories, once you are baptized and accepted into the Christian world, the Christian folk, you are a slave, you are a free person. Prince Edward Island, which is St. John's Island, in 1781, came out with a legislation around the legal parameters of slavery. And that is what they enacted. For years, it stayed there until the abolishment of the slave trade, but they never dealt with it. It stood there until 1835, when they finally decided that, okay, we are going to do away with this part of history. So they struck it down. The question then becomes, if you are not using it and slavery was abolished, why do you let it sit there? You can only understand that through the lenses of Scottish and the Scottish regime at the time. Because at the time, PEI was not PEI like we know. It was Scottish rule. And those are from the British. So what they say is what they do. So it's like, we are not going to do away with this, but this is what we're going to do. So in short, we have our own share of slavery. People say it's not as profound as US. That's true, basically true, because we don't have people being hanged or stuff like that. But when it comes to denial of the humanity, it was okay. It was there because of the way they came in. So when you look at it, it's always on the East Coast because the West Coast was not open to that side of the world. So it's always the East Coast.
Certainly unsettling in terms of the image that we have of ourselves as Canadians. There was slavery in Canada. Thank you, Sam. Listen, why don't I ask some of our group to maybe put their questions to the doctor. I have an interesting one here. We have a few questions. I have an interesting one from Claire that is really a healthcare issue. Claire, as a part of Black History Month, was sending around some information. And I remember the Black Panthers. You know, she was talking about the Black Panthers, you know, and my parents thought the Black Panthers were really cool. It's just the kind of household I grew up in. You know, they were militant, they were powerful, they were strong, but of course they were stigmatized as communists and lefties and violent. But the Black Panthers were very concerned about healthcare and very concerned about sickle cell anemia, and they established healthcare facilities. But Claire, I know you have a question about blood donors and kind of a really interesting healthcare question. And I know our good friend here is well versed in healthcare matters, and so wondering if you could ask your question, please, Claire, and welcome.
Thank you, Tom. I just wanted to find out from you, Doctor, with regard to the same sickle cell anemia. We know that that is blood disorder that is unique to Black people. And it was recently reported that there are not enough Black blood donors in Alberta to address these health concerns. They said that the number remains static. So it's like around 1% currently. But my question is like two-tiered. I just want to find out what are your thoughts on perhaps organizing the Black community here in Alberta, getting them to donate blood, understanding the importance of donating blood, and also when it comes to encouraging our Black students to study more STEM programs, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, getting to study those programs that perhaps may benefit our community going forward in the medical fields.
Thank you. That's a great question. Great question. So Canada's blood donation policies are actually quite controversial. Canada is one of those countries that has had so many controversies around it, around discrimination of different groups. Because the thing about blood is anytime you have a scandal around blood, like you say something bad happens, say, for example, people receive blood and it's contaminated. That drives the public into fear. The government reacts. The government reacts to that fear by enacting policies to shut things down. So there was a time we had something called the tainted blood scandal, where there was blood that was tainted was used, and I think it was HIV contaminated blood. That led the government to essentially shut down blood donation by persons who are gay, because they, at the time, because of HIV crisis, was affecting a lot of gay men especially. So there's a tendency around blood for governments to react to public fear around something that happens that might just be a one-off. And Black people have not been Black people are sort of part of that story in terms of how the government treats them. It's essentially, our blood policies are in many ways racist and discriminatory. And the thing around exclusion of Black people comes from fear. When I first moved to Canada, I tried to donate blood, and I was told that because I grew up in Nigeria and I've had malaria, I cannot donate blood. I have never donated blood since I moved here. I'm not allowed to. But that's a policy that treats me as somebody who grew up somewhere as excluded forever. It cannot change. Anytime I go back, I'm told, where did you grow up? Once I say that, that's it, I'm out. It is not science-based. It's not something that is based on any kind of logic, because certainly if you were here, if you're born here and you went to a tropical place, you could get malaria. If you come back, they're not going to do that to you, right? So I think that question is a complex one, because blood is something that the public at large, they have a lot of fears around. As you can imagine, when people need blood transfusion, they want the blood to be whatever they want it to be, and their fear is what translates into government policy. A related problem is that it is difficult because many Black people are, first generation or second generation, maybe third generation. You have to go to like Nova Scotia to see Black people who have been here longer than that, right? And the problem is, if you're trying to get a community to buy into something, you cannot start by saying, explain yourself or explain why you have to be part of something, right? But there's a simple reason why the government should change its attitude towards Black donation of blood. Because when Black people need blood, it's not there too, right? So the government needs to rethink all of that. Now, how do we go about it? I think you can do, campaigns where you educate people about the need to do so. But the main struggle is that the government needs to change its attitude and its policy towards certain communities. It was only just last year that the rule around gay people being able to donate blood changed in Canada. So you need the government to say, look, we have to get rid of all of these fears, right? We now have ways of testing blood for all kinds of things. If you want to donate blood, come donate blood. And we will make sure the blood is safe. There are ways to scientifically ensure that the blood is safe without marginalizing communities. So that's one part. The second part of your question about STEM, about more Black people getting involved in the STEM fields. So it's essentially science fields. There's actually a lot of things going on right now to try and get more Black people involved in that. So, for example, at the University of Alberta, we have programs where mostly led by Black people who have initiated programs where they reach out to high school students or to Black undergraduates, and they enroll them in summer programs where they get mentoring, where they get funding, where they get ability to work with businesses so that they can get introduced to those STEM fields and so that they can use that as a path towards university. But again, the thing is, if you have, like I have what I'm doing for Black students who want to go to law school, I also have a full-time job. It is difficult for me to be able to do it the way I want to do it. It is better if institutions and governments take charge of it. So one of the things we could remind people to do during Black History Month is to, especially governments, or people, if you're somebody who's not Black but you care about Black people, you could think about who you can influence, because it's a good thing if the community benefits everyone the same. And if we talk to governments and governments are able to sort of fund these programs or help these programs get started, if you get more Black people involved, you change a lot of things for Black people. One area I'll comment on very quickly, Black women who have to have babies are some of the most endangered species of patients you have in our healthcare system. If you're a Black woman, having a baby is a health crisis. Many Black women don't survive it. That's because in the system, they get treated in a way that does not recognize the kinds of unique situations that they are in, the kind of unique problems. My wife, for example, just to give you a story that's relatable, my wife, for a second baby, developed preeclampsia, which is hypertension during pregnancy. It is very common among Black women. There's higher incidence among Black women. Many Black women don't come out of that. They either die during childbirth. Our second daughter was born at 28 weeks. That's how bad it is, And it only happened. We're lucky because my wife is a nurse. She knew when she started to experience it. And we're also lucky that when we got to the hospital, they didn't say go home, which happens to many Black women. They just tell them to go home. And so if you have a Black doctor, you have a Black nurse, that changes the story. This has been shown in the United States, for example. The more Black people you recruit into medicine, the less that happens. But those Black people also care for other people who are not Black. So that kind of diversity is actually really a good thing. I know that's a roundabout way to answer your question, but yeah.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, I'm just going to jump in here and thank you, Doctor. It's a very interesting conversation so far. I do want to remind you, if you are listening in and you want to ask a question, all you need to do is press the star button on your phone to be put into the queue, or put your hand up if you're watching live stream. I just wanted to jump in here because I do have a poll question to ask, and we are getting near the end of the call. So it's such a critically important conversation we're having. We are going to just wrap up the call with some union business at the very end. So we'll do that shortly here. But just wanted to let you know that you still can ask a question. We do have a couple that I'm going to try and get us to near the end of the call. But I will pass it back to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Rochelle. We've got a couple of more looming questions from our activists, our fabulous four who are sitting here. Maybe I'll give. I will ask you to be brief. You know, I feel like the television host who says we're running out of time. We just have a few more minutes. I mean, I hate being that person, but maybe I'll give Abdi the last word. But I'll ask Faduma first. You have a very interesting question about youth, about Black children, and I'm wondering if you could offer your question to Ubaka, please.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, this question is very important, especially for us in the room who are parents of young children. So my question is, many say that Black children who are minority in their country lose their innocence at a young age due to racism. This is because Black families consider it important to make their children aware of racism at any earlier age other than racial groups. What are your thoughts on this?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it's certainly the case that I'm a parent, right? I want my children to have a very realistic view of the world they're stepping into. My 10-year-old daughter is the only Black girl in our class. If I don't tell her, she's going to ask me at some point. My older daughter, there have been attempts to do what is called streaming to her. You know, she gets a C, it's a crisis. I got a C, it's fine. And then there's an attempt to put her in a special class because she got a C. You don't want them finding out about these things and then coming to you with all kinds of questions about why this is happening to them. You want to prepare them. And you want to prepare them in an appropriate way. You want to say to them, look, your life here is not going to be the same as the life of some other kids. So I need to explain to you. I have two daughters, you know, I have to explain to you what it is to be a Black girl in this society. That's just called parenting. Whether you're white, you're Black, you're brown, we all do it. We all tell our kids about how their life is going to be like. We draw from our history, we draw from our experience, we draw from the teachings of our elders, we draw from everywhere to tell them what we think are important lessons they should know, right? If you're Christian, you're going to tell them, here are the, you know, if you're, you know, the 10 Commandments, right? If you're Muslim, you're going to tell them these are the teachings in the Quran. That's not any different from being Black. If you're Black, you're going to say, this is what life is like here. So I don't think it's about losing innocence. Certainly you want to tell them at a time where they can understand it, but it's not about losing innocence. It's about giving them what parents give to their children. But what I tell my kids is, look, I'm telling you this so not that you can live in fear, right? But so that you're aware and so that you tell me when these things happen to you. If you prepare them, then there's no shock when they hear it. You know, I've told my older daughter, for example, about the kinds of things that may happen to her. So when those things start to happen to her, she comes to me and says, like you said, it happened. Because I don't want her to find out and then go into shock. And by the time I find out, it's turned into something else. So I don't think it's about losing innocence. I think it's about doing what parents do, which is prepare their children.
Thank you. Ubaka Abdi, I know you've got a union question.
He's the union person. I get to answer the...
You've got a union question. You know, a really overlooked aspect of Dr. Martin Luther King's life is that he was a union activist. And in fact, he called unions America's first anti-poverty program. And the night before he was assassinated, I think it was in 1968 or 69, he was poised to attend a strike, a picket line. You know, there were Black sanitation workers in Memphis, and they wore signs that spoke to their humanity. Their signs said, their picket sign said, "I am a man. I am a human being." That's the manner in which they were treated. I quoted Dr. King today at our executive board meeting, who said that what does it matter if you can all drink from the same water fountain or sit at the same lunch counter if you cannot afford a hamburger, as we fight for our members in this affordability crisis. But Abdi, I see you've got a question about the civil rights movement and the labor movement. So for our audience questions, I'm going to give you the last word. And you are indeed resplendent in your orange shirt.
Thank you, Tom.
You get best shirt. He's got best shoes. You get best shirt.
Yeah, I didn't want to take up all the best items. Right? I appreciate it, Tom and Michelle, and all the activists in the room, those that are listening to us and watching us. I'd like to thank you for your time and for joining us and for commemorating this month and this event with us and contributing to the Black joy that is Black History Month. I can't thank enough all of the above mentioned people in their efforts to make this a better experience for every Black member they have and every worker, uplifting them. I can't think of any better way to equalize things than to have a collective agreement at a workplace and to treat every person that's working in any workplace to have the same and equal rights. With that, I like to go to my question and highlight that the labor movement has been a key ally in civil rights movement and in every movement that deals with equality, and unions have played and continue to play a vital and a pivotal role in the fight for civil rights in North America and beyond. In what way do you think, Dr. Ubaka, that unions and labor movements and workers in general can support the struggles of Black people, communities that are that need that support and workers in general?
Thank you for that question. Look at this room. I think this room answers your question. I think, as you noted, these two things have always gone hand in hand. The reason why labor and civil rights are basically, two sides of the same coin is because work is where people's civil rights tend to get abused. Anybody who has ever worked in their life knows that there's a need to protect the humanity in work. And because that's, we spend much of our lives working, and through that, protect the humanity in people. They go hand in hand because they inevitably are the same. The people who have to work are usually people who need civil rights, right? Who demand it, who need it for protection, who need it for expression, who need to be able to sort of equalize or at least respond to the massive amount of power that is marshaled against them. The people who make us work are very powerful. People who demand our labor are very powerful. And they want that labor because it allows them to make profit and to keep all that profit for themselves. And so, whenever you see a civil rights movement, it is essentially a labor movement. It needs people who work, that are the ones who understand what it feels like to be oppressed. They're the ones who are, in fact, often the oppressed people. And labor movements necessarily have to care about those things because that is the heart of what they do. If you cannot care about whether people eat, sleep well, be respected at work, have a safe workplace, don't get injured at work, if you don't care about those things, you're not a labor movement. And if you care about those things, you're a labor movement. And so I don't see those things as separate. They are one and the same. A labor movement is a civil rights movement. They are not separate. It might be that the way you come at it is to say, I am fighting for civil rights. But inevitably, you're going to turn into a labor movement. Or you can come at it from, I'm a labor movement, but inevitably, you're a civil rights movement. In the current time, workers need protections. And we have a society where people are not willing to for that. I mean, think of Cargill, for example. This is a place where people make a ton of money. A pandemic starts, and you can't even do the decent thing. The people who actually produce that labor for you that allows you to make money, you can't do the decent thing of giving them working conditions that are safe. They're the same thing. Labor and civil rights, same thing. I can't think of any way that you construct the civil rights movement that doesn't involve people who work. And because people who work don't just work for themselves, they usually work so they can take care of others who are not able to work. All of us here have, we have relatives who are taking care of. We have people who are feeding. Some of us have people we take care of here and people who take care of wherever it is that we started from, right? And if we hear what those people are going through, we're the ones who are going to have to stand up for them, right? It's not the person who has never worked one day in their lives, right? And you cannot understand the pain of waking up every day to go and earn a living and then having people who necessarily abuse your humanity unless you've actually worked. So I think they're one and the same. Thank you.
Well, I think I could chat with you all night. I look forward to your new book, The Red Shoes of the Red Shoes, right? It might be the
shoes are the shoes.
The shoes are the shoes are the shoes. Yes. But on the theme of books, we have a gift for you, a little two-part gift.
Oh, wow.
And they are books.
I love books.
And I thought you might like books. And the first one is The Sleeping Car Porter. The first black union in North America were the Union of Sleeping Car Porters. They achieved their first collective agreement in 1945, and this is a really interesting book about a sleeping car porter, and we wanted to give you that.
Thank you.
And I have another book for you. One of my heroes growing up, I have a signed boxing glove, is Muhammad Ali, who really paved the way for a protest among athletes, from Colin Kaepernick taking a knee and black athletes, and really paid a very, very dearly for his political views. I remember watching him fighting in Canada with my brother on the shag rug in our living room,
Wow,
in Toronto and in Vancouver. And he was, Americans wanted to put him in jail. They didn't like his religious views. They didn't like his views on the war.
Yeah.
And decades later, received a Presidential Medal of Honor for who he was. So he was not only certainly a fighter and an entertainer, but a great political figure. And so we want to present you with these books, sir. And I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your participation. I'll never forget the phrase, Black joy and black hurt. And your reflections on solidarity, your life, and your insights into these concepts have been invaluable. I cannot thank you enough.
Thank you.
And you brought great black joy to our
I hope so.
celebration of Black History Month.
I hope so. Thank you.
Sir.
I appreciate it. And thanks to all of you as well. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for the gift. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much. Just a reminder for anybody listening in, we are going to move to union business now. Again, thank you so much to our guests and our panels, our staff who had questions for the good doctor, and of course the good doctor and Tom for walking us through such a critically important conversation. So if you are listening in, you can press the star button on your phone to ask a question, or you can hit the hand icon if you are watching us on video to be put into a queue. We do have some questions that I'm going to ask that maybe Tom cover in his report. So we're going to move quickly. We are coming to the very end of the call. So I'm going to ask Tom to give a presidential report in just a moment. But before I do that, I did ask you a poll question around if you felt it was important to have Black History Month and other dates to reflect on the struggles and injustices in society. And 84% of you said yes, and 15% of you said no. So So I want to thank you for taking the time to answer that poll question. I have one other poll question I'm going to ask you. And general membership meetings, we do try to have a mix between broader issues with speakers and guests, and then get to union business, where we talk a little bit about collective bargaining and workplaces, and of course the minutes and financials of the union. So we want to just ask you, on a general membership town hall meeting, we have had a large range of speakers talking from anything from members' issues around health issues to social justice issues, things like benefits. So, do you support your union in continuing to bring guest speakers on these variety of important topics? So, if you're on the phone, you use your keypad to answer that question. And if you are on your laptop or smartphone watching in, then you can just use the vote tab. So, again, the question is, on these general membership town halls, we've had a large range of speakers talking about anything from members' issues at work to health issues to social justice issues. Do you support your union in continuing to bring these speakers in on a variety of important topics? Okay, with that, I am going to pass it to Tom to walk us through the business report and the moment of silence. Thank you.
Well, the business report is the business of the union, and I want to identify three key themes in terms of what our focus is and is going to be for the next couple of years. And it's three things: affordability, affordability, and affordability. We face an unprecedented affordability crisis in our society. The only comparable time, the only type of inflationary pressures we've ever faced like this in the past were perhaps in the late 70s, very early 80s, where a guy named Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin's dad, said that I'm going to write a law about wage and price controls, and he capped wage increases in Canada at 10% per year. Wow, our members would enjoy a 10% per year wage increase, wouldn't they? And we've been meeting with our executive board. I want to welcome our executive board members who are attending with us tonight. And our executive board is an elected board that gives the union a sense of direction. And they said three things to us today and yesterday and the day before: affordability, affordability, and affordability. There's a mental health crisis in this country, and what does it largely relate to? The studies are saying that people are lying awake at night with anxiety and interacting with people poorly because they can't afford to live. Alberta has the highest utility rates in this country, in no small measure because of the monopoly of electrical companies, and they are gouging us, and government needs to step in and regulate. We face unprecedented grocery bills where people cannot afford to shop where they work. An interesting thing just happened in our federal parliament. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, managed to advance a bill that's passed first reading in Parliament that relates to giving more power to the Competition Bureau to regulate grocery companies and the kind of price gouging that they're engaging in. Rent is a horrible problem for working people in this province. I watched television the other night, and they showed these two towers in southeast Calgary, and they were interviewing people, and their rent was going up by $600 a month. And single mothers, new Canadians, Black people were saying, I can't afford to live here anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do. And there are jurisdictions in this country, there are provinces in this country where the government controls rent. It is not unprecedented in Canadian history. I, in fact, grew up in a rent-controlled apartment. I grew up poor in an old apartment building. And my mother looked at us one day and said, we can't afford to eat and pay rent. And the premier of the province got on the black and white television and said, I am freezing rents and I'm controlling rents. And my mother cried because we could afford to live. The Bank of Canada continues to pursue a ridiculous economic policy of driving up interest rates in order to somehow slow spending to prevent inflation. It's nonsense. It may slow you down from going down to the clothing store to buy that sweater that you've had your eye on, but The fact of the matter is it's driven your mortgage through the roof, and it's not helping you. And so the affordability crisis is going to be front and center for our union for the next couple of years. And of course, one key response to an affordability crisis and the inability to pay your wages is to push harder and harder for improved wages and benefits. We're meeting with our executive board and our negotiators and our staff to set as an absolute priority the most aggressive collective bargaining that we've ever engaged in our local union's history. It started to reap some benefits. We're seeing figures like 5% and 4% and 4% at Maple Leaf Foods. We're seeing benefits being laminated and protected at Maple Leaf Foods, a bargaining unit for which we just got a first collective agreement that we took from CLAC in Edmonton. We saw in the Safeway wage reopener the single largest wage increases for top-rated and overscale employees in 30 years. Well, Safeway did, unfortunately, and quite tragically and quite stupidly and quite brutally forget about all the other employees who weren't at top rate or overscale. But this theme of stopping the squeeze, that's the phrase we're using at the local union. People are getting squeezed. It is hurting their hearts. It is hurting their brains. It is hurting their pocketbook. It is hurting their relationships. They are feeling this pressure. Will be the theme of the conduct of this local union in bargaining next year, the year after, and the year after that, and as long as is necessary. And we need to rethink our approach. We need to be more aggressive than we've ever been. We bargained retail agreements when there was a period of deflation where the prices were going down. And so we approached collective bargaining relatively modestly. Those days are gone. We need to adjust our own thinking. We need to prepare for strikes in ways that we never have. And if you look at trends across this country, unions have been striking and pushing back and settling on economics that we have not seen for decades. And our union must do the same and can do the same. That is my report. It is that simple. And yes, we're bargaining at Red Lobster Restaurant in West Edmonton and fighting for good wages there. And we're bargaining in healthcare, and we're bargaining at a variety of different workplaces. And if you want to hear about the specifics of those rounds of negotiations and those collective bargaining efforts, give me a call, talk to your rep. We can lay it out for you, work with your bargaining committee. But I want to emphasize for everyone in this room and everyone on this call that it is time to reach for more. We are paying more. And we've got to ensure that we are reaching more when we are paying more. We need to find that balance. That needs to be our goal. Everyone needs to be on board. We need leverage. We need strength. We need solidarity. And I urge you all to join Rochelle and I and our executive board in this initiative in the coming months and years. We must stand up. Because as Dr. Martin Luther King said, it does not matter if you can all drink from the same water fountain, sit at the same lunch counter, or ride the same bus if you cannot afford to eat, if you cannot afford to pay your bills. We must push. So that's my report.
Well said, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, round of applause. Well said. Thank you. I do have the poll results. I asked if you continued to support your union in bringing in guest speakers on a variety of important topics, and 86% of you said yes, you do support that, and 14% said no. And I think, Tom, in light of some of your remarks, we do have some questions, or I guess kind of comments as well. I have a few of them, and I'm not going to go over them specifically, but because I think your comments answered them all. So maybe I'll just reinforce that, and then I will pass it back to you for the moment of silence, and then we will wrap up with finances. But we have some questions from Matthew Carew around what is the extent that the union enforces the contract. We have some questions around trophy food agreements from Hassan. And I think one around the Tell Us As It Is survey. So we do see these questions, and I think, it's good when you have a specific question about your workplace. We will follow up with that after the general membership meeting. We can't spend a lot of time, unfortunately, on individual workplaces because we have a wide range of members listening in from a bunch of different workplaces. But I think what you heard the president say is it's time to fight and it's time to push very, very hard in our workplaces and at the bargaining table. So if you have specific questions about your contract or your workplace, please do not hesitate to call the office and ask to speak to your union rep. Tom and I are always available too, so you can do that as well. And then, of course, you also have your shop stewards in the workplaces that you can ask those questions of too. So thank you for that. And a reminder, if you do want to ask a question, just press the star button or the hand button on your live stream. Tom, I'll ask you to lead us through a moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. I do want to address, I see a question there, and I want to address it briefly about the extent to which we enforce the collective agreement. So enforcement of the collective agreement is, first of all, member dependent. We must work together with our members to enforce a collective agreement. So members come to us, they identify the problems, they apprise themselves of their rights under the collective agreement, and then we work with them to enforce. But enforcement of a collective agreement isn't just up to us. So I'll use a comparison to the legal system. So you can hire a lawyer, but if you don't have any witnesses, you're going to lose. A lawyer can talk, but our legal system and the pursuit of grievances is based on facts and the participation of witnesses who can support the process. So members themselves need to come forward. You know, here's my schedule, here's what happened to me, fill out a statement and provide the proof of the grievance. The union representative then advances the argument that relates to the proof. But all too often, and I understand why, because people are scared, it's an affordability crisis, they want to pay their bills, they're like, I want the union to enforce the collective agreement, but it's not an abstraction, it's not something the rep can do on their own. The member themselves must participate. And so we need to find the strength and the will to do that and work as a team to enforce collective agreements. So I did want to comment on that. I will speak to the notion, to the moment of silence. And at every meeting that union meeting that we have, we talk about, we punctuate, and we remember our own. Our members are hard-working people. They are essential workers, and they make the world go round. They are at times characterized by and portrayed as ordinary people, but we know that our members do extraordinary things every single day. They feed Alberta, they serve Alberta, they make Alberta work. And so to that end, when our members pass, as between union meetings, when a union meeting arrives, we like to acknowledge and punctuate them. They were loved, their families hurt, they've made a contribution, and they matter. And as union members, they most certainly matter to other union members. They matter to us. I'd first like to acknowledge and punctuate the death of a dear friend to our movement, who was one of our staff representatives for many years, worked for our national office for 5 years, and worked for our local union for about 15 years. He retired and shortly thereafter was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and he fought and struggled with that illness, and he passed on the weekend. His name was David Smith. His smile, his sort of understated counsel, his awareness of the world around him, matters political and economic. You know, he was a remarkable individual who served our members well for years and fought for our members and was a true friend of working people. He was a cashier at a Safeway store in Banff. And he became attached to our movement, and our movement roused his passions. And indeed, Dave's passions did show through the course of his career on behalf of our members. And we lost Dave this weekend. We are saddened and to some extent without words. It is a very difficult and hard loss for so many of us. For those members that knew him, I extend, and those that knew him and interacted with him, that were his friends and his colleagues and his coworkers, I extend my deepest condolences on behalf of Rochelle and I. There are other individuals who we have lost in recent days and weeks. Patricia Twack was a Superstore employee at store 1579. Christopher Reynolds from Safeway 8809. Patricia Shad Lowry from JBS, and Igmar Mission from Cargill. These are working people like us, union members like us, who are gone. They are lost. They are lost to us, lost to their families, and we all struggle with ways to express our grief when we lose our friends and our brothers and sisters who are part of our movement, who share our values, who share our work. They matter, and they matter to our union. And so I ask you to join me to reflect on these losses and share a moment of silence to punctuate that loss.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone. Okay,
Thank
to
you.
wrap up the call, we are going to move to the finances. So I'm going to ask my studio audience if I can have a mover and a seconder, since I can see you all. I thought that might be nice. So for those of you that haven't joined us before, I do report on a summary of the finances. Anybody that wants to see the full financial report can always contact me, and I will walk through that with you. As always. So I report on things like, all of our monies goes towards things like arbitration bills, lost wages for members when they're off doing union work, like collective bargaining. We have WCB expenses, and all of these are covered in the full report. But I'm going to be reporting on 2 months this evening, November and December, and I'm going to report on monies coming in and then the disbursements, which is money going out. So in November, our revenue is around 2.5 million, and our receipts and disbursements for that month were around 2 million. We did have to pay some insurance coverage and some scholarships out for that month as well. And in December, our revenue was around 2.3 million, and our receipts and disbursements were around 1.4. This was year end, so a little bit different of a month because we have to reconcile some things at the end of the year. So kind of an exception there, but we are happy to say that in both months, this local continues to operate in the black and not in the negative, which is always a very good thing, because like we talked about at our board, we're going to need some resources heading into these very large rounds of and very challenging rounds of collective bargaining in this environment today. So to summarize my report, overall in 2023, your local union performed very well financially, and we are looking forward to announcing some initiatives in 2024 around some more engagement and bargaining campaigns. So with that, I will ask for a mover of the finances. I see Nate, and a seconder. I see Margaret. Thank you. So my poll question I will put to you now that they've been moved and seconded is press 1 if you accept the report, and press 2 if you do not accept the report. And if you're watching online today, you can vote on your screen using that tab. So again, press 1 if you accept the report, and press 2 if you do not, or use the vote icon on your screen if you are watching live stream today. So, wow, so far that's very quick. I have a gentleman sitting beside me who writes down my poll results, and he's writing very quickly. So thank you all for voting so quickly. I'm just going to give it another minute or so to make sure that all of you have had that chance to vote. And while we wait, I want to take the opportunity to thank our staff panel so very much for their participation. Of course, our president, Tom Hesse, of course, the folks that help us put these town halls on, all our studio audience members and staff for joining us, and of course, most importantly, all of you for joining us on the phone or on the live stream this evening. And it looks like we have 100% yes acceptance of the financials. So thank you all very, very much. And I hope you have a good and safe evening. Take care.